Hello, everyone, and welcome to Medicamentum Authentica. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kaufman. This week, I'm going to continue talking about law and the legal system, and we're going to focus specifically on mortgages and the fraud of the mortgage in the United States. And I have another guest, someone who's really distinguished himself not only with knowledge of the law, but actually putting his knowledge into practice and having an excellent track record of personal success, specifically with mortgages, but not exclusively. And I'm talking about none other than Bryan Aromaye, whose platform on YouTube is Stand Strong, where you can find information about his website and his products and services. And Bryan is a very interesting guy who, came to this subject, really has a knack for understanding the law, and has done a deep dive on a lot of the financial aspects of the legal system. And when I came across his material, I was quite impressed with the way he explained things, that he didn't fudge over things. He went all the way down to the excruciating level of detail to really give a thorough understanding. And if you're in my audience, you know I really appreciate that way of analyzing information. So let me welcome Bryan onto the stage. Hello there.
Great. Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So is there anything else you want to add about your background to let the viewers put you in context?
Oh, well, sure. Before I got into this space, I was working as a construction electrician where I was, responsible for a whole lot of money and a whole lot of people, dealing with the dangers of construction, especially electrical side. And I did that for about 15 years in the Dallas area. And then I started to get interested into real estate, seeking other options of investments, to kind of diversify my situation. And that took one heck of a turn. It got me down one heck of a rabbit hole, let's say. And learning how to acquire property with little to no money without using banks is what really set the foundation for later when I started looking into my own personal documents a little bit closer. And then that's where all the fun began.
It's quite amazing if you start actually reading the documents that you sign at some of these big transactions that you're going to just pick up a few things that don't quite add up.
Yes, sir. They don't add up. They don't add up. So that's what was the biggest highlight moment was like, oh my goodness. And then as I started to, scour the internet for more information on things, I started to see that, hey, there was a big situation that happened, pertaining to these mortgages, around that 2008. Now, of course, in 2008, I wasn't thinking about no properties and, we heard about the bust, but we didn't really care because it didn't really directly affect us at the time. But here it is years later that we see the results of what that happened and how things have not really changed much. Now there has been more laws to help us fight against it, but it doesn't do much good for those that don't know or are even aware of the fraud period.
That's right. And I think, the laws you're talking about, Dodd-Frank and those
Mhm.
regulations for mortgage-backed securities, right? Because 2008, the real estate bubble crash was really related to lending practices of
Yeah.
essentially giving loans to anyone and giving multiple loans to them, right? So that they could gamble on the back end through hypothecation and mortgage-backed securities. And The Big Short is the popular movie that
Yes.
you guys can watch. That can
Great move.
kind of, you'll understand exactly how this works if you pay attention to that film. And we're not going to talk about derivatives today, but certainly this is an area where the banks are getting very, very wealthy by essentially using your investment, and they're not telling you about it or cutting you in on it.
That part.
So, Bryan, when you just to clarify, when you're saying that you were buying properties without banks, what do you mean exactly?
Okay, well, the strategy that I had learned from my mentor was called creative real estate investing, right? And it's pretty much with the basic foundation of the old bartering system, right? You got two live people, and both of them have something to offer each other. Typically, let's say in my domain, there may be somebody going through a situation with their property where they need the property gone. Okay. The properties may be causing them some type of pain or some type of burden, and they're not really seeking to get, let's say, market value for the property. All right. So
I see.
that's where
So this could be like a distressed property or that they're
stress,
in
yeah,
arrears
inherited.
on.
Yeah, it could be inherited
Ah,
property. Sometimes people inherit property, they don't really know what to do with it. These types of individuals or situations are motivated sellers. And with a motivated situation, you can work out a deal. All right. They might not want full payment. They may want to take monthly payments. All right. So
so owner financing.
there you go, the owner financing. So with those types of situations, you don't need no bank. All right. Because the owner can be the financing, or if you find the right person and they want to, let's say, take an upfront payment, 5, 6, 10, $7,000. It all depends on the situation. My first property was like 5 grand on a credit card, is what the exchange was. The property at the time was worth to about 230,000. And the person in particular, they had just purchased the home. So they didn't really have any equity in it to sell it. They just wanted it gone, but they didn't want it to affect their credit.
So you are basically covering their mortgage payment.
Yeah, subject to is what we I took over it subject to the existing mortgage loan. Okay. So that's how I acquired the property. Now, at the same time, I didn't want the property to live in, right? So I had to find a tenant, a
Hmm.
renter, somebody who needed a home and wanted a home. But the biggest part of this was I don't use credit. I don't care about no credit. All I want to know is you have the funds. Do you have the funds which is anywhere between 10 to 15% of the estimated appraisal value of the property? If you have that as a down payment, you can move in. All right. We're going to verify your work history. You have a solid work history and you can afford to pay that. But that's how the negotiation works. So now that I have a buyer, right, or somebody who's going to move in, and they're going to typically sign a promissory note with me because we're not doing a credit transaction.
I
I'm
see.
property and we're
Now,
going to have
Brian, if you got to be careful saying this because you're going to have a lot of people wanting to you as a landlord.
well, hey, it is what it is, all right? It is what it is. Now, this is the beautiful thing you said that because you're true. When we offer properties like this, I have no problem getting rid of them. They sell in 24, 48 hours because everybody has money. Even some of your greatest, doctors and attorneys, they may be good on cash flow, but their credit might be shot. So this is a type of opportunity for everybody because we're not using credit. So understanding those aspects of the transaction and the paperwork involved helped me lay the platform where I could easily see how, hold on, the bank's not doing what I'm doing because I'm a living person, they're a living person. We're right here face to face at closing, right? And we're all signing the documents, including the promissory notes. Even the mortgages, okay, the agreement to sell the real estate. Me and them are signing it with the notary. So that's the first part. My document work was more solid than what I'm seeing with these banks. On top of that, they're not even perfecting their interest in the property according to the laws that govern the
Right,
transaction.
right. So now
So,
let's slow things down a little bit because you said a couple of key things here, and I noticed this too because I've purchased 3 or 4 houses over my lifetime, and at the closing, that I've never seen someone from the bank.
hmm, so that shows there was never a mutual assent.
That's right. That's right. Because, they, and I noticed too that, there's several documents and we're going to talk about the specific documents, but I noticed that some of the main documents I signed, but there was, and they were an agreement, a contract, right, between me and the other party, right, the bank or the servicer, but
Right.
yet they didn't sign it.
Hmm.
It's kind of strange to have a contract where only one party signs.
Right. And with that, even though the notary is a witness to you signing the document, right? She's also a witness that no one else was there.
That's right. Okay, so now the other remind us of the other part that you were just getting to.
Okay, as far as the finding the tenant. Now, once we have a tenant and they've qualified and passed the screening to move in, now we have three-party relationship. All right, between me and the person, that already had the property that's in their name, the subject to owner. Right now, we make the transaction. Now, this is the tricky part. Okay, the tricky part is transferring the ownership from them to my, let's say, LLC without violating the due on sale clause. Now, there's one or two or three.
Without violating what?
The due on sale clause is typically in most mortgages where it's a clause that states if the transfer of the ownership is to change, the banks can invoke the due on sale clause and demand to be paid in full.
I see.
Okay. Now, the only way to keep this from happening is that the actual owner cannot leave title. So some people do this by using land trusts. We use LLCs. We'll just name the LLC after the person, and then they transfer ownership to the LLC. And at that point, they're a business owner. Then they have the option of selling the business to someone else who now has ownership of the business. Okay. So that's the other strategy we
I
use.
see. Okay. So that
Oh,
way you kind of keep the ownership steady, right? Or it's kind of like a trick to transfer the ownership without transferring the ownership.
right. Because as long as the owner is still part of the company, it didn't really change ownership. And she
That's right.
hired our
You could probably put it into a trust and change the ownership of the
that
trust as well, right?
that's what some other people use. They do that with a land trust.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the part of getting ownership. And once we have ownership, we are actually become the financing, owner financing, we finance and provide the home to somebody without no credit. And it's been pretty good once I got involved with that. Once that transaction was complete, I was really so amazed and just blown away because I can't lie. It took a while before I got to that first property. I went through a lot of duds and a lot of money. I ain't gonna lie. It was about 6 months. I say I probably went about the initial investment was 30,000 for the mentorship. Okay. And then on top of that, I'll say about another maybe about 15, 20 went into expenses on starting the business and running ads and just all the expenses of getting involved with this. Not to
Right. You
mention
got to
that
find these properties with motivated sellers.
there you
That's
go.
probably
And
the
well,
hardest part.
that is the hardest part, but we have technology now. It was really made it easier because we can run ads and now they come find us.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the biggest part. I didn't have to go find her. I put the ad out and she called me. So
Oh,
that's
excellent.
right. And I would have to cut the phone off because it'd be so many calls and I just couldn't handle them at that point. So I actually started doing something else with the Airbnbs because here in Dallas, I had a wonderful situation. It kind of went faster than me acquiring real estate when I could acquire multiple doors. So that kind of put a halt on the real estate investment. And then I say about a year later, I acquired another property. So I needed to do something back to the real estate. So I kind of shut down the Airbnbs and started focusing on real estate. And then I started actually studying on executing a process to reconvey the property based on what I knew from real estate investing and what I was learning with the UCC. Okay. So that started the part of making sure that all the contracts were complete and accepted as far as the warranty deed. Then we start looking at
Okay,
the
wait,
deed.
wait. So before we go into that, let's just tell folks about. So one thing is you mentioned the UCC, right? That's the Uniform Commercial Code, and this is basically a rule book for all transactions in commerce, and
Right.
it's codified in the federal law as well as in every state in the United States and pretty much every country in the world. And so that's what you were mentioning, but there you started talking about the deed, okay? And there's a
Mhm.
couple of different kinds of deeds, but let's talk about just the basic documents of a mortgage and real estate transaction and what the role or significance of the documents is.
Awesome. Well, the deed is the first document of conveyance, and that's just from whoever currently holds the property. They're transferring their rights, interest over typically what's the word called? Be simple, with all rights conveyed to the grantee. Now, on the deed
Right. And so
itself,
basically the person selling the house is on the document called the grantor, right? And basically giving this property, right, and all the rights to it and interests in it to the grantee, which is the buyer, and for whatever consideration is mentioned in this document, right? And conveyance, are we talking about a transfer of ownership?
Yes, we are talking about the transfer of ownership in the property listed on the deed. And that's the only way to convey property is through a deed. Typically, deed is interchanged with the word title. All right, you'll hear that word as well. Now, that's a two-party document, and that's the first document that has to take place before you can do anything with a bank. Why is the big question, and we're going to get to why.
Right. Now
Because
this is one of the things that just, when I saw this, I was blown away because, there's like the date, right, that you get the supposedly signed for the bank loan, and then
Mhm,
there's the date of the deed, and the deed says you now own the property, right? And it's
right,
like it was a week before I signed any loan papers. So did I
that's
own?
accurate dated
Yes.
different.
It's
Really, it's,
yes,
it's
and for two separate homes that I own, this is the
mhm,
case that the deed is dated because I so I realized we're going to get to one of the other documents, right, which is could be the mortgage, depending on what state you live, or the deed of trust.
right.
But in the mortgage, it says that I certify that I own this property, right? So in other words, you have to own it before you're eligible to mortgage it, because when you mortgage it, you're actually giving it away. You're pledging it to another party, right? It's a mortgage means death pledge.
Mhm.
So this is crazy. So you actually own the house, right?
For the
Before you
first,
get any loan.
before you get a loan, you already owned it, right? Because you can't put up for collateral something you don't own. If that was the case, I could tell the bank to meet me at Andrew's house. I'm gonna put his house up for collateral. Let me get about 4 million. Ain't that right, Andrew? Oh no, oh no.
So
Right?
this must be the same thing when you get a car loan.
Hmm. Car
How can
loans
you
is
put the
different.
car up for collateral until you own it?
There you go. There you go. It brings that question, right? You start thinking about things different. Well, dang, I did. Oh, I have to own it first. Now, what's the proof of you? Oh, no, you didn't own it. Someone will say you didn't own it. Well, if you look at your deed and the way that it's worded, it's gonna say here acknowledged in hand paid valuable consideration. Then it also gonna say receipt of which. Receipt of which, whenever we go in the store, we make a purchase, the proof of the purchase is the receipt. So your deed is your receipt. It's your proof of purchase so that you can sit down at the table with the bank now that you are a property owner. And if you look and see how much it was, typically it's $10 in valuable consideration. Now
So
I've
on
seen
mine,
very
just to tell you the exact words, and I have two of them, right? And one of
okay.
them is $1 and the other is $10,
Ooh,
but they both
there you
say
go.
something slightly different. I mean,
Mm,
they both, other than that, they're exactly the same. So it says, for the consideration of $10 and other consideration provided, past
mm,
tense, right?
Passed. That means it was completed. It was done.
Exactly. So, in other words, I paid for it for $10 and other consideration, which I imagine would be the earnest money that I put down
Mm,
as a deposit.
there you go. And maybe the
And
application, did you apply your social security number on? Did they might have got a payment for or an exchange for as well?
well, I mean, I think, I'm sure that there was certainly charged me a couple of
Mhm.
fees for running my credit report and for the appraisal that I had to pay for. So, I imagine, and then I'm not sure on the other end what they've done with it. We could have another discussion about that, but absolutely. So those all those were consideration, um, and it's really just kind of mind blowing that to see that, okay, this is the legal proof that you own it. So then why would you go and pledge it to a bank?
Hmm. Well, because to your understanding and your conditioning, the bank is making it as pure as if they provided you something in exchange for that transaction, but they don't provide you any documents that clearly state how they perform. Now,
That's right. Even yeah. So well, let's get to the second document to help us understand that better.
all right, so now we're looking at, I'm in the deed of trust state, so a lot of times that's my first go-to, but if you're not in the deed of trust state, you typically will have a mortgage or a security deed. All right. So I'm always going to speak from what I have experienced, which was deed of trust, and I will mention the others as well. But as far as the deed of trust state, now we're forming a trust with the bank. Typically, we are the grantor, where I see us listed as the trustors. But what they put on the contract or the deed of trust itself and the definitions, which is the first part of the deed of trust, it's going to start with definitions. Why? Because they want you to come into an understanding of what these words mean when you see them on this document. So they don't want you to come in with your own understanding. They're trying to give you the understanding. So they're going to have borrower typically bold and maybe italicized in quotation marks. And it'll say borrower is such and such man or woman and man, husband and wife. And then it's going to say who are or who is the trustor to the security instrument. Trustor. And then that word is going to be in all lower caps. Now, what's going on here? All right. When we look at any type of trust, a trust has three parties. You have the trustor slash grantor, you have a trustee, and then you have a beneficiary. The trustor slash grantor is the one creating the trust. They're having a contractual relationship with the trustee. They're giving them power to do something at the benefit or behalf of someone else, which is the beneficiary. I typically like to explain this as parents with their children and a babysitter. Parents are the trustor, grantors. They hire the babysitter as the trustee to look out on behalf of the children, which are the beneficiary. The children cannot tell the trustee what to do. The trustee has guidelines. There's the foundation, which is the law of the trustors. All right. Now, if you was to hire a babysitter and come home, and after, whatever you went to go do and come back and you see your children up full of sugar running all over the place and they're supposed to be asleep, what do you think you're going to do with that trustee or the babysitter?
Well, they're going to get a talking to.
Right, or possibly fire, right? We're not going to
Yes.
be happy. All right. So understanding this relationship, you kind of understand your power within the document. But if you don't understand that relationship, you don't understand your power in this document. Now, with this document, we show up to closing, right? And all the documents are prepared for us. So automatically, we're already in a situation where we're feeling like we're at the mercy to somebody else because they're doing something for us that we don't realize we're the powerful one here. We're the one granting power. We're not receiving power, we're granting it. But they have it set up for a reason like this. So now they give us this deed of trust. And what do they typically tell us to do? Sign right here, sign right here, sign right here. You're a homeowner. Woo-woo. So they got your emotions involved, right? Now, they also put a stack of papers. We're only talking about 3 pieces of sheets, sometimes maybe even a little bit more, but 3 documents, all right? But you have a stack of other documents that they want you to sign. Now, in my particular closings, I've witnessed they gave us 2 stacks, the ones that we're going to keep and the ones we're going to sign for them. Now, it's intimidating if you've never been in a situation like this before. You don't know what's going on. You just know that you came in here in full faith and expecting truthfulness from these people.
That's
Now,
right.
everybody at the table is not in on the fraud, okay? They're just doing their job, following procedures. 9 times out of 10, they don't even know the law. They know this is just procedure. This is what we do at closing. So it's not them, y'all. It's what's going on the back end is the problem. So here we are with this document they provided for us. We don't know that we have the power. We don't know that we hiring a trustee. And that trustee in a deed of trust is the person in the event of default, meaning you stop paying or making those extra payments that you agreed to in the promissory note, they have the power to foreclose or transfer ownership in the property. All right. Now, the problem with that is that position, it's a trust relationship. Now, prior to me getting into trust, I didn't really understand the power of it. But when I started to get into trust, I realized the power of the fiduciary, which is the trustee. So here we are with a mortgage. Trust law doesn't change. They change the application of it, but the trust law doesn't change. It's still the same positions of this contractual agreement. So with this trustee, you would want to know who your trustee is. You want to know who's watching your kids, right? All right. So at this mortgage closing, they have a trustee listed on your documents, but you've never met them. They're not even at the closing, right? This is a big obligation we have here, y'all. These properties are hundreds and millions of dollars. Wouldn't it be in their interest
Now,
to
Brian,
have?
also, wouldn't it make sense that if you are the trustor of this trust, that you would be the one to select the trustee?
Exactly. Someone did you know and did you trust? Right? So did you trust? Not that they trust to act on their behalf, right? Because there's a lot of times listed as the beneficiary on these documents. If it's not MERS, it all depends. So now that I said that keyword, let's talk about MERS. Now, sometimes you have MERS listed as a beneficiary on your documents. We've already talked about the trustee. The trustee be named as a person. I've seen the trustee named as the title company. All right. Now, the third party, which is the beneficiary that we're saying is supposed to be our children, they'll list someone like MERS or maybe the lender. We're going to focus on MERS though. So when they do MERS, now you have a third party coming into play. Do you know MERS? Do you know your children? Right? Because you have them listed as your beneficiaries. Now, technically, a beneficiary listed in a trust doesn't have to sign, they just have to be mentioned. Okay, that's one thing. But what you have in a lot of these mortgages is in the event of default, before they try to foreclose, they are trying to use MERS to transfer or reassign ownership. When MERS in the documents, there's nowhere listed of that type of power and duty. They just list them as a nominee or a
Right.
sign.
Right, and let's go over a little bit what MERS is, because everybody might be a little confused right now. But if you own a home and you look on your deed of trust or mortgage, if it was done in, I don't know, in the last 20 years or something, since MERS has been around, you'll see that they're on the document. And now my understanding, and I forget what MERS, it's an acronym for something, but that they're
MERS
supposed to really just
electronic
hold, what is it?
MERS electronic registration system.
Okay, right. Mortgage electronic registration system, right? So my understanding from their mission statement is that they're basically like a database of all of these important documents and numbers and such to help the banks keep track of things. But now you're telling me that they're actually playing an active role, right, as having an interest,
That's what
right?
they try to position themselves as having an interest. That's the problem. They're just a beneficiary, listed as a beneficiary. Okay.
Right. And it seems like also this way that you describe the trustee, could be from a title insurance company or whoever, that they're basically taking instructions from the beneficiary. So it's like the kid telling the babysitter what to do,
There you go. There you
right?
go.
Like
Now,
we think you should foreclose now.
right. There you go. Now it'd be different if the grantor was to pass away, right? Okay, now it trust becomes irrevocable because the grantor or trustor is gone, and now the trustee is left with the rules and regulations to govern things on behalf of the beneficiary. But that's not what happened. So as long as the grantor or trustor is still alive, they have what's called a reversion. They still have interest in the property. Okay, they're still alive. They still have interest. That means they still have a say so. All right. So now, since we don't know what's going on in these now the MERS or the agents on behalf of MERS go to make a move or like to reassign the property, once they do that and the grantor slash trustor doesn't say anything or challenge that motion, they consent.
That's right. Silence is
They
consent,
consent.
right? That's a model that's used on us very often.
Yes. they consent to that action. And that's what we don't know, to say, hold on, I didn't say that was cool. I didn't approve that. Stop that. So when we don't, they do. Now they try to get the upper hand. So this is what I have learned, and just seeing how things move and how things are listed in the document. So what we do to try to counter that is understanding that at any given time, the trustor slash grantor can get rid of the trustee. The trustee, typically listed in your deed of trust, what his powers and duties are, says they have the power to sell or transfer. If you remove that person, they no longer have the power, and you have the power to remove them because it's your document, it's your trust. You can replace them with somebody or a company that. It's all up to you. But once that trustee is substituted, that creates a heck of a problem for the lender or alleged lender or who's ever alleging to be your trustee on your document who never accepted your position or your
That's right,
offer for that.
because any foreclosure action has to be initiated by the trustee.
There you go.
Well, that's very interesting. And so, is there a way to, with a mortgage, right, which is a little bit different because it doesn't,
Mhm.
well, it may establish a trust, but it doesn't establish a trust outright. But the parties, right, are the mortgagor,
Mhm.
which is the buyer, right, the one who's pledging their property, and then the mortgagee who receives the mortgage. So you're actually granting the mortgage to the bank or whatever
Mhm.
entity is.
And typically that's MERS as well. A lot of times I've seen MERS listed or a servicer listed as the grantee for the lender. The lender will be listed as well on the mortgage, but they just have a MERS is the servicer for the lender and mortgage E in this document is how they have them listed. So you'll see MERS always listed with about 2 to 3 titles in one document. And it's pretty funny with all this responsibility and there's no agent there, just like in the deed of trust, we have the same thing with a mortgage. The only difference is the deed of trust has 3 parties and the mortgage has 2 parties, mortgagee and mortgagor. So we become the mortgagor on that document, just like we were the trustor or grantor on the deed of
Right.
trust. So we're giving it to MERS as a mortgagee. Now, where is the acknowledgement of MERS or somebody, agent acting on behalf of MERS that was at closing to sign this form and take over or accept any rights and interests?
Right.
Right? So that's the other option with the mortgage or security deed. All right.
And let me
Now,
just explain that term agent really quick because,
okay.
right, a corporation, we're talking about MERS as a corporation, right? The bank that you're dealing with is a corporation, and corporations are dead entities, right? They're just stacks of paper. They can't
Yes.
speak for themselves. So anyone that signs on behalf of a corporation is an agent that they represent that corporation, right? So
Right.
we might think, that, oh, what's going on here? How do they separate their status as, as a man or woman from, and they're not the company, right? So they're an agent for the company. And
Mhm.
what he's saying is that, at the time we're executing this trust or this mortgage contract, that only one party's there. There's no way to have a meeting of the minds, for example,
Mhm.
to back and forth and come to an understanding. And there's every contract has to have an offer and acceptance, and this is codified. This is basic contract law, but it's also specifically in the UCC. And so these contracts, right, there's an offer that attests to it, but there's no acceptance by the other party.
Mhm. Correct. So now we have a situation on our hands. All right. We have incomplete contracts that they're trying to enforce. Now, it's one thing to bring this issue up, and then it's another thing to say, okay, how would I fix it? Well, anytime we have a contract with somebody, they have a duty to us. Okay. So if we see something we don't like, we also reserve the option to change the terms and conditions of a contract. Now, keep in mind on both contracts, whether it's the deed of trust or the security deed or the mortgage, the grantor or mortgagor slash trustor is the one making the offer. Okay. No, you have no proof, as reference to the UCC, of your offer being accepted within a certain amount of time. You can treat your offer as having lapsed before acceptance. Okay. Now,
And it's
what
90 days,
90 days is
right?
what the UCC, the general rule of thumb, what the UCC is 90 days. Now, if you send notice, let's say right after closing, you send a notice to the people and you ask them certain questions like, hey, I was looking over the documents and I have a few questions with this. I didn't see any acknowledgement of acceptance from the other parties. Could y'all send that to me? And could you please make sure that document is certified under the penalty of perjury? Something simple of asking that little statement. All right. Now they have a duty to respond to you. They may try to bluff you and change the topic. Oh, no, but they have a duty to respond. Now, in the event that they don't respond when they have a duty to respond, that can be considered that they agree with what you said or they're committing fraud. Now, what you do after that is the next part. Now you follow back up. Hey, I sent notice on this date. So now what's happening is we're creating a paper trail. Why? Because court starts in the mail, not when we get in the room. And if we discover or feel fraud is happening, we bring that notice to the we're dealing with. They have an obligation to us. So let's get this resolved. Now, after that, we just pretty much started to implement, administrative policy or administrative procedure on trying to settle a private matter. Now, with these, let's say, go back to the deed of trust, the trustee, if I'm giving notice to the trustee, and let's say I'm giving notice to the MERS, which is the beneficiary, on these deeds of trust documents, they typically have an address of where these people can be reached at. All right. So how should that make somebody feel if I'm reaching out to you in this contract and you're ignoring me? We was just all good a week ago when I was sitting at the table, but hold on, they wasn't there anyway. Maybe that's why they're ignoring you. It's hard to contract with a tree, just like it's hard to contract with someone that doesn't exist. But this is what's happening in mortgage transactions. We are contracting with trees. When I say trees, well, the paperwork is just paper, comes from
That's
trees.
right.
Nobody's there. It's just you and the notary, right? So in the event you stop paying or you default, that's when all of a sudden people start coming alive. Oh, he's defaulted. Let's join the party. Why is it like that? Well, I'm gonna tell you why it's like that. As long as their names or nobody is signing on behalf of the people that you're stating in these documents, they can miss a liability issue. What would that liability be issue would be in finance? Any wild guesses? Taxes, maybe? Because you've signed up to pay, you gave them a check, you told them you're gonna give them monthly payments and interest, and you're gonna cover all taxes and insurance. You're covering everything. And they're benefiting, they ain't put up nothing. They wasn't even there. They couldn't even pay you that much respect to show up in your face and smile and say thank you. But let you stop paying. Oh, they're gonna try to come with the floodgates on
Well,
you.
when they send you notices of, delinquent payments or a default letter, they also nobody signs it.
Here we go again. So here, oh, they have it printed of someone's name, or they may just say the
Well,
business
it
name.
says like servicing department,
Yeah, yeah. So just think about that whole little. You're dealing with someone who's not even real, but when you don't comply, they're gonna try to make things real for you. So that's the basic understanding of what's going on in the documents. Now, how to fight it is just
Well,
a
now
series.
we're missing a document though.
Oh, the promissory note. Yeah, we were talking about the promissory note. I mentioned it in my mind. I talked about it, but okay. So that's the. Let's go back to the deed of trust. Now, with that deed of trust, it's going to reference typically the promissory note. All right. Now, when we look at the promissory note typically has definitions on it as well. It's letting you know who, what, when, where, and how. But it's you making a promise to them. Typically, it may say for value received, I agree to pay.
Yes, for mine says for a loan received.
Or loan received, okay? Loan received. Now, when you go look at your promissory note, it's going to have definitions, all right? I want you to look at the definition of the loan, okay? Typically, what the loan is going to say is loan means debt evidenced by the note that you provided. Debt means loan evidenced by the note that you provided where you agreed to pay monthly pay. That's what it's going to say. I'm going to tell you what the loan definition will not say. Loan, debt evidenced by the stack of money we provided to you in cash when you came to us. It's not going to say loan means the check we provided to you or on your behalf for the sale and purchase of said property. It's not going to say that. You know why? Because that's not what they did. And if they said that, they would be lying. Now, here's another key jewel of this transaction situation. Now, I don't know about the audience, but I'm pretty sure anybody that makes a transaction over a certain limit with your bank, you ever had to fill out a document or anything?
Like you're talking about for an overdraft?
Well, not overdraft. Let's say I'm wiring money over $10,000 to somewhere. Okay. There's typically a form, or I think it's 3,000 nowadays. If you send anything over 3,000, you got to fill out what's called a FinCEN report. Okay. And this is how they monitor money laundering. All right. Any person sending this type of money, you have to fill out this form. So if they loan you money over $10,000, where is the FinCEN report to show you that transfer your closing documents? Nobody knows to even ask for that.
That's very interesting. Well,
See,
also, where did those funds go?
where did they go? Right? Everything is trackable. It's supposed to be tracked in business. So in accounting, if something goes in, that has to have an equal action on the other side. All right, something has to go out. So they're required to be operating by the principles of what's called the GAAP, General Accounting Accepting Procedures. All right. So they have to be able to show both sides of that ledger. Was an asset given to you? Did you receive an asset or did you give an asset which created a liability on your books? All right. So it's not that we're making stuff up, y'all. Everything is tracked. Where's the financial records to show this money leaving the bank, going to somewhere else? We don't know to ask for this stuff and don't even know that we're entitled to ask for this.
Well, let me tell you, it's not easy to get this, Bryan, but I did so I inquired with two separate banks that I had mortgages with, asking for this information. I mean, specifically, I asked for the evidence showing that they had an asset that they lent to me, right, and also that it went into my account to prove that I received it. And one bank actually sent me the bookkeeping entry, and it shows in their general ledger, and it's reference tied to my loan number, and it shows one asset in the amount of the loan and one liability in the amount of the loan that are basically offsetting. Right? So that basically the asset came from the promissory note, and the liability came from them using, supposedly delivering those funds to me, but they didn't actually deliver them to me.
Righteous. So there you have it. We provide an asset. If we're providing an asset in exchange for a service, it settles out, it balances out the books, right? There is no accounts receivable, we're waiting to receive payment. No, it balanced out. But we don't know this, and then they're hitting us with, well, you signed the contract, so we're entitled to receive payment, right? And that's where they go back to often. So that's what you have on it. It's just the document itself within the promissory note. The definition tells you clearly that you provided a loan, not the bank.
That's crazy. So now, wouldn't this constitute fraud in factum, since you entered into a contract that was essentially you thought was one thing, but was something totally different?
They intentionally deceived you or omitted information that could affect your thought process or your choice in options. Yes, that could be constituted a fraud the way the laws is written. False and
Bec-
deceptive practices.
right? And because if you could get the bank on the witness stand, or to submit documents to this effect, right, explaining that they took your promissory note and deposited, right? They actually borrowed from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that has the cash value, and then they
Right.
returned back to you your own money,
Mm-hmm.
but tricked you into thinking they were lending you their money,
Righteous.
right? So
Righteous.
that I mean should outright constitute fraud. I mean, and then that doesn't even count for the fraud that they sort of said you needed to take out a loan to buy this house that you already owned.
There you go. There you go. Now, here goes another thing. Someone might say, well, how do you know that you funded the loan or this is what banks do? Now, prior to, a few years ago, I had came across this form. All money comes from the Federal Reserve, right? They print off Federal Reserve notes. Now, what a lot of us don't know is that these banks that we deal with, they have to take something to the Federal Reserve in order for them to get the notes, right? What do they have to take? Well, that's kind of questionable if you don't know where to look. Now, if you go to the Federal Reserve actual website, there's a lot of information on there that they tell you. And they have different forms. One in particular is Circular 10. And I suggest everybody go look at that form, Circular 10, Federal Reserve Circular 10. And you will see that they give a whole packet for US borrowers. So if you want an advancement on funds, they give you a packet of instructions on what you need to present to them in order for them to give the banks the funds. And one of those requirements is application. Okay. Application. And I'm gonna leave that part right there.
And the other thing is the collateral security, which is the promissory note.
Promissory notes. Now, or notes, and I say that plural because at the same time in that book, you're gonna see that the Federal Reserve requires the bank to put a lien on all their accounts, including their customers. So the Treasury becomes a secured party against those accounts. Now that's kind of going on a little deep in, but you brought up the collateral, and that collateral goes in reference to a financing statement. Remember what I mentioned earlier that they're not even perfecting their interest?
Yes. Yeah. Well, now you're talking about putting in UCC 1 and 3 financing statements, right, which
Right.
establishes a commercial lien because the mortgage or the deed of trust is a lien also, right? But in order to perfect their interest, they're supposed to also file the commercial lien, right? But they never do this. If you can look in two places. You can go to your county where the property is recorded and ask if there are any liens recorded, and you'll find none. And you can go to your state Department of State website where the state liens are recorded, and you can search under your name, and you'll also find no liens.
UCC3, debtor search is what it's called.
Right.
No. Is it UCC or UCC 11? Might be UCC 11 debtor
Yeah,
search. I
the
think
search I think is 11, and the 3 is
9.
when there's a change of
Mhm.
secured party.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The assignment. So yeah, so that's the third part of 3 with these documents on what they're using against us just because we don't understand and we don't even read the documents, y'all. That's what it really boils down to. But even if we did read it, we wouldn't have much understanding. So that kind of intimidates us to read it, right? Not to read it, I should say. But yeah, so with those 3 documents, you have your deed, which gives you ownership of the property, typically for $1, $10. I even seen the full amount, whatever the purchase price will be listed on the deed, but it would not list the bank's name. I've also seen where they've tried to incorporate a lender on the deed, but it still didn't justify nothing because once again, the lender's not signing. Nobody's signing. So with these mortgages, y'all, it's really surprising with the amount of money that's involved that the paperwork is so sloppy. Because it shouldn't be no way in heck that I could come on here and break down all these errors in these documents. And it's what would stop a lot of it? Ask your question. What stops them from signing the document? What stops them from being in closing?
Well, I think you really, kind of hit the nail on the head already, right? It's that they would be they want to cover up all of the fraud that they're doing. And we didn't even, talk about all of it, right? We didn't talk about why they don't file UCC liens, right? Because they're selling it on the back end and doing other things, with these instruments, right? So essentially, they would have to be accountable to all those things and, of course, to their tax burden
There
if
you go.
they executed these documents properly. So it's like they're doing black market transactions.
Yes, exactly. And we're left to, deal with the what they call the collateral damage of it.
That's right, because it's not enough that they have, can basically multiply the value of the promissory note by, I've seen estimates of 7 to 9 times, right? But they also have to have you pay it back another time. It's like
Mhm.
that's not right. And the reason really, it's not just because of the greed of getting that extra money out of you. It's that if you wised up to what is really going on, you wouldn't allow any of it,
Mm-mm.
right? So they would basically lose the whole racket. It's like paying protection money to the mafia,
Hmm.
right? Once you realize that you're paying them to protect them from them,
Right.
it's like the whole thing can fall apart. You'd be like, I'm just going to move to, another town.
Yes. Yes. Indeed.
Well, Bryan, I think you have to go, right? So, but
Yeah.
this was
Going home.
an excellent introduction. So we covered, the basic three documents of mortgages, right? The warranty deed or the deed of conveyance that
Mhm.
provides ownership, the
Yeah.
deed of trust or mortgage contract, which is your relationship, right, with the bank. And thirdly, the promissory note, which is where you promise to pay back a loan that you actually provided
With the check.
with a debt.
There you
And
go.
right, and then of course we talked about various aspects of fraud and essentially breach of contract or lack of certification of a contract, right, involved in the home buying process. And of course, this suggests lots of ways that you can deal with these predatory corporations in order to basically get what you're supposed to get, a fair deal.
Indeed.
All right. Well, Bryan, is there any place that you'd like to send people or give your website, for example?
Yes. Everything I like to send people first to is the YouTube platform because that's where you get the videos and the information in the videos and also on YouTube. In the bio, you have my link tree that links you to various products and services that I do offer, whether it's consultation or courses for you to gain a better understanding. It comes from my personal experiences. So
That's
stay
awesome. And let me,
on YouTube.
from my personal experience, Bryan is extremely professional and diligent. If you do choose to work from him, it won't be, he'll be on time. He'll provide you with the information that you need, and he won't string you along or try to take advantage of you in any way. So I thoroughly recommend checking out his material. And thank you so much for coming on and educating this audience today.
Peace and prosperity. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you next time on
All right,
Medicamentum
peace.
Authentica.